Hello and welcome back as we continue our World Holiday Spectacular journey aboard the Regent 7 Seas Voyager. This is part 2 of 7, and in this part we will be visiting the city of Santa Cruz de Tenerife in the Canary Islands. We'll then do 2 days at sea before arriving in Mindelo in the island nation of Cape Verde. But the first stop on this leg of our journey was Santa Cruz de Tenerife in the Canary Islands. Santa Cruz is the second most populous city in the Canary Islands and the capital of the island of Tenerife. Today we had another early 8:15 a.m. excursion entitled UNESCO Biosphere Reserve and the World Heritage Center of La Laguna. We hopped on our bus for a drive to the other side of the island. Sounds easy, but the drive was around and over the substantial mountains that populate the island. And while the roads were in good repair, they were very narrow with dozens, perhaps hundreds of switchbacks and blind curves, making for a slow ascent and descent and giving the ride a dangerous appearance for our large bus. Many of the curves were impossible to negotiate if there was oncoming traffic. And since many of the curves were blind curves, the bus literally had to slowly approach the curve and poke the nose of the bus around the curve to see if it was safe to turn. There were guardrails, but they seemed much too insubstantial to actually stop the large bus from tumbling down the mountainside. Thankfully, our driver was very skilled and no mishaps occurred. So on we drove, passing small communities and homes literally hanging from the sides of mountains. Our first stop, once reaching the other side of those mountains, was the village of Taganana. With a population of around 525, it is the 6th most populous community in the Anana region of Tenerife. Here we would stop for a little sightseeing and then a wine tasting. We did a brief stop on the rugged coastline, taking in the rocky beaches and striking mountainous terrain that are the highlights of this area. After enjoying a bit of time at the beach, we hopped back aboard our coach and headed back up the mountain to a small family-owned restaurant for a wine tasting. The restaurant literally hung on the side of the mountain, overlooking a narrow valley below. The wine tasting this time was a legitimate one, and we sat in a restaurant perched on the side of the mountain, enjoying a glass of wine, some goat cheese, freshly baked bread, and a stunning view. It was simple fare, but very good and all locally produced. Leaving the restaurant, we continued on, this time mostly skirting the mountains, and headed towards San Cristobal de la Laguna, a Spanish colonial city that in 1999 became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. La Laguna was the former capital of the Canary Islands. The city is the 3rd most populous city of the archipelago, with a population of around 161,000, and is the 2nd most populous city of the island of Tenerife. In 1999, the historical center of La Laguna was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO after being nominated by Spain. It is situated nearby the city of Santa Cruz de Tenerife, and the 2 cities and nearby communities form a single large urban area of over 500,000. La Laguna is considered to be the cultural and artistic capital and a religious center of the Canary Islands, and has an abundance of well-preserved Spanish colonial architecture and sites of religious significance. We spent about an hour and a half wandering the streets of La Laguna before we found this, the Hermitage and Church of Ermita de San Miguel. We wandered over for a look inside and found an interesting display open to the public for Christmas. This was a very interesting diorama of sorts, with much of it rendered with amazing detail. After enjoying the diorama for a while and making a small donation as we walked out, it was time once more to wander the streets of San Cristobal de la Laguna. From narrow streets and alleyways to well-kept hotels and restaurants, we continued and then met the bus for the ride back to our starting point, Santa Cruz de Tenerife. Once back in Santa Cruz, we stopped at the Auditorium of the Canary Islands, an interesting architectural piece that sits next to a park and an old Spanish fort. The Castillo de San Juan Bautista, sometimes called the Castillo Negro or Black Castle. The Castillo is an historic 17th century coastal fortification that today is more of a monument than a tourist attraction since it cannot be toured or accessed. After wandering around a bit in the area, it was time to hop back on our bus and return to the RSSC Voyager. Tonight's dinner was at the Campus Rose once more. We enjoyed a special Christmas Eve menu, and songs started with a Scandinavian gravlax, while I started with the Austrian pumpkin soup, and a short order of the Italian lobster ricotta ravioli served in a lemon cream sauce. And while Song went for a seared cod, I opted for a tasty Christmas goose from Germany. And we couldn't resist the desserts on this Christmas Eve either. So I had the Bûche de Noël, or Yule log, from France, while Song had a passion fruit curd tartlet. So happy and brimming over with Christmas spirit, we made our way to the atrium for a picture bursting at the seams. After catching a show in the Constellation Theater, it was time for a nightcap in the Horizon Lounge. From there, it was off to bed to get ready for 2 lazy days at sea en route to our next port of call. Getting up the next morning and enjoying the beautiful ocean views, a quick workout, and then it was time to plan our day. An easy way to do that is either look through your passages, or you can look at the passages on the Regent Voyager entertainment system. After making a plan, we caught a lecture and then headed up to the pool deck to enjoy our first BBC of the voyage. For those of you who are not in the know, a BBC is shorthand for a Bailey's and banana colada, and that consists of Bailey's Irish cream, a banana, and a pina colada mix. Yum! So after wasting the day away, it was time to change for dinner and head off to the Campus Rose. It was Christmas Day, and it was tonight that I experienced my first letdown as far as dining was concerned, with a tough and leathery pork chop that had to be returned to the kitchen for another try. Please check out our dining and drink guide already published for more on that experience. After fooling around a bit, it was time for bed and get ready for the next sea day. It was another relaxing sea day, and after our morning workout, a light breakfast in La Veranda, it was time for a cup of coffee in the Coffee Connection. Later in the morning, we attended a very interesting lecture by Peter Lasorsa on how we communicate through expressions and body language as much as we communicate verbally. And then later in the afternoon, it was all about pirates. Yes, we had warnings up till now, and now we had to do a mandatory pirate response drill. We were entering waters later that day where there was a possibility, albeit a vague possibility, of pirates attacking our ship. After our exercise, I returned to the suite, resheathed my cutlass, and got ready to repel all boarders. And because we were entering these murky waters that may or may not contain pirates, all passengers were expected to do was to stay away from windows, stay off the open decks, and follow crew instructions. As a further precaution when traveling at night, all of the upper decks and funnel lights would be turned off, and all of the public venues with windows were to be blacked out. Guests would also be expected to keep the curtains of their suites drawn and the veranda lights off. And while this might have been a pirate, chances are it was not. No cannons were unlimbered and no shots were fired. So changing clothes, we prepared for the evening, and tonight dinner would be at Settimari. Please check out our dining and drink guide to see what Settimari is all about. Tonight we shared dinner with new shipboard friends, and a fine time and fine meal was had by all, including this colossal lamb shank and this very tasty lasagna. We decided to abstain from dessert and just enjoy a bit of limoncello. After carousing around a bit more, it was time for bed and to get ready for the next day's adventures. Today we docked in Porto Grande in the city of Mindelo in the island nation of Cape Verde. Cape Verde is an archipelago consisting of 10 islands, with 9 of those 10 being inhabited. It is located about 370 miles or 600 kilometers west of the African nation of Senegal. All 10 islands are volcanic in nature, and there is a population of about 525,000 spread out across the 9 different inhabitable islands. Because of its location and proximity to Africa, it is considered an African nation. Mindelo is located on the island of São Vicente and sits on a natural deepwater harbor in Porto Grande Bay. We were up early that morning, did a little workout, had a light breakfast in La Veranda, and had time for a cup of cappuccino in the coffee connection before heading out for our excursion of the day, the highlights of Cape Verde. Before heading out, it is always wise to check the Passages newsletter for information on what you would be required to carry in the way of identification, the local currency, and phone numbers for the local port agent in case you run into any troubles. Our excursion today was rather euphemistically entitled Highlights of Cape Verde. An interesting title since we would only be visiting the one island of the 9 inhabited islands. We were warned before setting out on the excursion that we should not wear fancy, flashy, or expensive jewelry or watches. This was because, while generally safe and friendly, the islands do have a small amount of petty crime. We were also warned that the buses would be somewhat on the more austere side of what we're normally used to. The bus we boarded was certainly a small, simple one with no air conditioning, hard seats, and stinking of diesel. It also looked like a commuter bus with hand straps hanging from the crossbars. On the plus side, it was clean and, as we found out, sturdy. Our first stop and mission for the day was to climb to the top of Mount Verde. Thankfully, that meant climbing in the bus. It was here that we found out just how sturdy the bus was. The road at some point changed from a paved surface to this narrow, one-lane cobblestone road. Ours, along with the 10 or 12 other buses climbing up the mountain, were the little buses that could. And so we drove up that narrow pathway, shake, rattle, and rolling our way to the top of the mountain. It was an interesting ride, to say the least, and by the end, we were all checking the fillings of our teeth to make sure nothing had shook loose. The first stop at the literal end of our rocky road was the peak of the highest mountain on the island, Mount Verde, which is Portuguese for Green Mountain. Mount Verde is 2,441 feet or 774 meters at its peak and is home to a large antenna farm and several small, struggling farmers eking out a living from the fertile but dry volcanic soil. On the viewing platform, we met this little cat who seemed to be in heaven from all the attention he was receiving. From the viewing platform, we were awarded simply stunning views of the countryside, Mindelo, and some of the neighboring islands. But soon enough, it was time to find our bus once more and head down the mountain, while our driver coordinated with buses moving up the mountain. The ride down was just as bumpy as the ride up, with even better views from our side of the bus now of the arid and rocky landscapes. From here, we caught glimpses of our next destination, the shores of Catfish Bay. Catfish Bay is a local recreational area, officially called Baía das Gatas, or Bay of the Cats. This is an area with vacation homes, popular with locals and visitors. Bay is replete with sandy beaches and crystal clear, pristine water, along with locals, tourists, and even local entrepreneurs. From Catfish Bay, we boarded our bus and drove to another scenic outlook on the coast. Here we stopped and had some grog. Those that wanted to could try a little sip of this fiery liquid, a 90-proof rum that is produced locally and is the national drink of Cape Verde. This scenic spot for a while, it was time to board our bus and head back down the highway to our next stop, a turtle rescue and sanctuary. Here at the sanctuary, we were able to get close-up views of the rescued turtles.
Oh, this one broke me off a little bit.
And even had the opportunity to hold one of the little guys.
Oh,
yeah.
And soon enough, we were back on the road again and headed toward the other side of the island, which is called the agricultural side of the island. A little more rain falls here, and many of the residents of this area have small patches dedicated to vegetables, which they will harvest and sell at market. With the weather cooperating and giving us a beautiful blue and cloudy sky, we were able to get some simply stunning landscape photos and video. And while we didn't actually circumnavigate the entire island, we did go around and through the mountains and to return to the ship from the other side. We found this excursion to be pretty nice in a very simplistic and naturalistic way, and think that Cape Verde has an interesting future ahead as a tourist destination as they build infrastructure. Right now, it is a simple stop with an interesting outlook. Back on board the 7 Seas Voyager, and we did a little bit of transfer to the computer and a bit of editing and maybe a nap before enjoying a very nice 6 p.m. sail away. The sun sinking low looked like it was sitting in a crater of a volcano. For dinner, and we headed to Prime 7, our reservation for the evening. Prime 7 is the Regent steak and chop house featuring prime aged cuts of beef, legacy pork, and a smattering of seafood. And while a reservation is required to dine at Prime 7, there is no additional upcharge. I started with an amazing ahi tuna and avocado poke, while she started with a crab cake. For our entrees, she went with a Dover sole, while I went with a beautiful 10-ounce prime ribeye. There is a small but very nicely done dessert menu, and Song had the Prime 7 version of a key lime pie, while I opted for an interesting bread pudding. After that, it was a bit of carousing around and then off to bed, pass out into a food coma, and get ready for another sea day. Well, thank you for watching, and please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be kept up to date with new videos as they are released. Please check out my much neglected website, tomsmultiinterest.com, and stay tuned for more. Part 3 is on the way, where we will enjoy another sea day en route to Dakar, a day in Dakar, Senegal, on to Banjul, Abidjan, and another sea day. Thank you for watching, and as always, safe and happy travels from T's Cruise and Travel Muse.